What's up, YouTube? I'm here doing my prediction video for UFC Fight Night, Edgar versus Munhoz. Let's start at the bottom. The first fight is Tumor Valley versus Trevin Jones. To me, Trevin Jones looks like he's okay everywhere. He's not amazing anywhere. He's just really tough and resilient, but that's about it. I think Tumor is the much better striker and the much better wrestler. Overall grappling is probably pretty close, but like I said, I think his wrestling is just way better and his striking is just way better. I don't know if he'll finish Trevin Jones because Trevin Jones is really hard to finish, but I just see Tumor dominating this fight from start to finish and winning by decision. Next is Carlton Minus versus Matthew. I can't say his last name. To me, Carlton Minus, I saw him fight in PFL. He fought Rick Story. He was undefeated then, but he just fought someone who I think was just way too good of a wrestler too early in his career. Since then, he's won a couple fights, and I think his record's either 10 or 11-1. To me, he looks like a really good striker. I think Matthew just looks really mediocre. I think he's just taking this fight on short notice, and the UFC's, giving him a shot. I think Carlton's a real solid up-and-comer, and I just think Carlton's probably got a big advantage in terms of the striking, and I don't think it's going to hit the ground, so I think Carlton's going to win by knockout or TKO sooner or later. Next is Isaac Villanueva versus Jordan Wright. Isaac, to me, in his UFC debut, looked a little outmatched in terms of the striking, and he's primarily a striker. I know he was fighting at heavyweight, and he's primarily a light heavyweight, but he still just looked a little not UFC level to me. Jordan Wright, it's hard to tell how good he is because he took that fight on the Contender Series and lost by knockout, but the other guy tested positive for something, so it's a no contest. And then he won a fight or two after that. So I think Jordan's either 10-0 or 11-0. And it's hard to tell how good Jordan is because it's like the only fight I really saw was that knockout, and it's like, was that a weight issue? Because now he's up at light heavyweight instead of middleweight. I'm just leaning towards the more well-rounded guy. I think Isaac's been submitted a lot, and Jordan Wright has a good mix of knockouts and submissions, and he's way younger. And like I said, if it was a weight-cutting issue and now he's at a more natural weight at light heavyweight, I don't think he'll get knocked out as easy. So I'm leaning towards the new guy, Jordan Wright. I think he gets to the ground and wins by submission. Next is Dwight Grant versus Cale Bourne. Kalen just looks like an okay guy. He hasn't really fought anyone super impressive in my opinion. He's 7-1, and I feel like he's primarily a grappler. I don't think his grappling is good enough to force Grant to the ground. I think Grant's got good takedown defense and good at getting back up. Grant's one weakness is just he doesn't let his hands go sometimes. I feel like as long as Grant does that, I think he'll win by knockout. I think he's got a huge advantage in terms of striking and in terms of like overall athleticism too. So I think all Grant needs to do is let his hands go, and if he does that, I think he wins by knockout by, round 1 or 2. Next is Austin Hubbard versus Joe Solecki. To me, Joe, in his UFC debut, the only thing he showed me is a really strong wrestler. I don't think his striking looked amazing, and I don't think his submission game looked that great. I think that Austin Hubbard has been fighting nothing but really strong wrestlers, and we've seen that he's gotten much better at getting, stuffing takedowns and getting up after takedowns. I think in terms of striking, Austin has a really big advantage. And I think just the fact that he's been fighting phenomenally good grapplers nonstop. I think Joe's another good grappler, but I don't think he's as good as like the last two. I know the last guy he fought gassed really hard after the first round, but in the first round he was dominating the shit out of Austin. I mean, he was attempting submissions after submissions, and Austin was able to dodge them, survive them, and get back up nonstop. And he was giving the Olympian guy a really hard time. I think Joe is going to have a hard time taking him down and holding him down, and I think every time Austin's able to get back up and just hit him with shots, because I think striking-wise he's got a big advantage, I think he's going to wear Joe down and eventually win by knockout or TKO, kind of like his last fight, either late second or early third. Next is Amanda Lemos versus Mizuki Ino. To me, this is so tough because I haven't really seen Amanda fight that much, and to me Mizuki looks like she's pretty good but not amazing. It's kind of like Amanda's a better striker, Mizuki's a better grappler. Overall, it's really close, but I'm leaning slightly towards Mizuki. It's one of these things where it's like I need to see these chicks fight like 1 or 2 more times before I feel super confident in either of them. So right now it's kind of a loose pick, but I'm picking Ino. I think she's just a little bit better with her grappling. I think she either gets a late submission or just edges out a close 29-28 decision. Next is Daniel Rodriguez versus Takashi Sato, and this is primarily two really good strikers going at it. They both kind of like to clinch wrestle a little bit, but they both primarily like to just box. I think Daniel and Takashi are both really good at taking hits. They both have pretty solid defense. I think Takashi definitely hits a little bit harder. I think Daniel throws a little bit more volume. Overall technique is probably slightly in the edge of Takashi. it's hard because I think Daniel's got a conditioning advantage, but not by a huge margin. And in terms of the overall wrestling and grappling, I think Daniel's probably more aggressive with it, but I think Sato has really good takedown defense. This is one of those fights where I just think it's really close. It's just one of those things where it could go either way, and I'm just leaning towards Sato. I just think he's a little bit better. It's not a huge gap, but I think that this might be a split decision. It could even be fight of the night just because how these guys fight. But I'm giving it ever so slightly to Sato. But I think this is one of those fights where it's going to be a split decision probably, and it could go either way unless one of these guys just catches each other early and knocks them out. But I just think it's going to be a close battle. But yeah, I'm going to Takashi split. Next is Maria, I can't say her last name, versus Shanna Dotson. I think Maria, they're just kind of featuring her an easy fight. I think she's better everywhere. I think Shanna Dotson's just mediocre at best. I mean, she's got okay striking and she hits really hard, and that's about it. I think Maria's just way better everywhere, and she's going to win however she wants. I think they're really just trying to hype up Maria because she looks pretty solid for an up-and-comer. So I'm going to pick Maria to win by finish in either round 1 or 2. Next is Marcin Parnoch, I can't say his last name, versus Mike Rodriguez. This is basically just two strikers going at it, but I think Mike's just the better overall striker. I think neither guy's an amazing grappler or wrestler. It's just going to be a kickboxing match as long as it lasts. And like I said, I think Mike's got the better striking technique and striking power. So I don't think this fight lasts that long. I think it's going to be a back and forth first round, and you just slowly see Mike take over and then eventually gets the knockout by the end. So yeah, round 1 KO by Mike. Next is Ovince St. Preux versus Alonzo Menifield, and this all depends on what the first round is, because I feel like the longer this fight goes, the more it favors OSP. I think OSP's got the better gas tank. He isn't like got an amazing gas tank, but I think he's good at pushing guys against the fence and kind of just doing what the last guy who fought Alonzo did. He's not as good of a wrestler as Devin Clark, but I think he's got more height and size than Devin does, and I think he's more overall athletic. Like Devin, it's pretty close in that, but I think St. Preux is just a little bit. Alonzo's got one-punch knockout power, and he can knock out anybody on any given night, but I haven't, that was the one thing I really wanted to see was how well does he do when guys force him to, like, clinch fight and wrestle and shit like that. And to me, he slowed down pretty hard, and it hasn't been long since that fight. He can knock out anyone in the first round. He's got good speed, good technique, and good punching power. But I think OSP has all those things too. Alonzo might be a little bit faster and hit a little bit harder, but I don't think it's by much. But like I said, I think in terms of wrestling and technique, especially against like clinch fighting against the fence and stuff like that, I think OSP's got a big advantage there. Like I said, other than Alonzo catching him early in the first, I think the longer this goes, the more it favors OSP. And I also think if OSP's on top of him at any point in time, I think OSP can stay on top of him and be heavy and probably finish him with ground and pound or a submission. So I'm leaning towards OSP. I just see way more ways for him to win this fight. I just think the only way Alonzo wins is a first round KO. And like I said, I think OSP can also win by first round KO because I don't think there's a huge gap in their overall striking. It's just Alonzo's a little bit faster and a little bit harder hitter. But yeah, I just say OSP, at the very least, it wins a 29-20 decision. If not, gets like a late second or third round finish. Next is Pedro Munhoz versus Frankie Edgar, and this fight is hard because I feel like I saw Pedro fight John Dodson, and he was able to kind of get the timing down and do better later in that fight, but in the beginning he was having a really hard time. I feel like he struggles with guys that are really fast and are very mobile, because Pedro is kind of slow and he likes to load up on his shots a little bit. And in that sense, I feel like Frankie, especially since this is a 5-round main event, definitely has the advantage in conditioning. I feel like Munhoz was slowing down when he fought Aljamain, and it's because Aljamain was mixing in a lot of wrestling and forcing Munhoz to get back up. And I think if Frankie can do that, he can definitely, copy what Aljamain did. Aljamain was kind of swinging with him in the middle. I think Frankie, I don't know if his chin can take those type of shots anymore. He's still tough. He can still take it. I'm just saying, I don't know if he can take it as well as he used to, especially cutting this much weight to 35. I know he's not like a small 35er, but still more weight than he's ever cut. For me, Munhoz is definitely the younger, more explosive guy. He definitely hits way harder. Frankie's never been submitted, so I don't think he's ever going to get caught in the guillotine, which is something Munhoz really likes to do. I just think it's either Frankie can keep the same type of pace that Aljamain did and just outpoint him for 5 rounds, or Munhoz kind of does what he did against Dotson late, where he starts to get the timing and he starts to walk him down and just land leg kicks and shit and wins by knockout sooner or later. It's really tough because I can see this going either way in that sense. It just depends on if Frankie can maintain doing what he probably needs to do to win, or can Munhoz figure out his speed and timing and walk him down with leg kicks and body shots and stuff like that. I'm leaning towards Frankie, but I'm not confident. I'm not going to lie. I think that one of those two things is going to happen, and I could realistically see either happening. I'm just leaning towards Frankie because I like him more. But I could easily see Munhoz just walking him down in the later rounds, especially with leg kicks and body shots, and just finishing him like the 4th or 5th. But I'm going to go with Frankie. I think that if he can keep the speed, which he usually does, keep the foot movement, not get pinned down, and mix in wrestling to tire out Munhoz, I think he can win, a unanimous decision. So I'm leaning towards Frankie to just outpoint him and win by decision. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys. Please like and subscribe.